Imagine owing the Kansas City Public Library a late fee that's been, compounding at 2 cents a day since like 1911.
Oh, man, that is a lot of pennies.
Right. I mean, that is actually the very first thing we saw when we opened the physical scans for today's deep dive.
Yeah, just glued right inside the front cover.
Exactly. It's this gorgeous old volume, and it has this weathered paper pocket with a really stern warning about overdue penalties.
2 cents a day really adds up over a century.
It really does, but honestly, the real shock inside this century-old book isn't the late fee. It's that the author perfectly diagnosed our modern attention economy.
Yeah, the isolation, the burnout.
Yes, he nailed the toxicity of hustle culture decades before the first computer was even built.
It's wild. So the book is called Self-Investment, and it was published by the Thomas Y. Crowell Company, written by Orison Swett Marden.
And our mission today for this deep dive is to really unpack this, right?
Exactly. We're going to figure out how a text written over a century ago serves as this flawless mirror for the exact modern conditions you and I find ourselves in today.
Because we are dealing with a society grappling with, well, massive information overload.
Which Marden actually calls the disease of hurry.
The disease of hurry. I love that phrase so much.
Right. And he links it to this profound starvation of our aesthetic faculties. So Marden maps out these two major pillars for navigating this kind of environment.
And those are?
First, treating conversation not just as a utility, but as a master art form. And second, treating beauty not as some luxury, but as a literal biological necessity.
Which is fascinating because the way he frames conversation is entirely different from how we tend to think about it today.
Oh, completely.
Like, he doesn't treat talking as just a vehicle for, exchanging data. He actually pulls a quote from Charles W. Eliot, who was the president of Harvard at the time.
Right, the mother tongue quote.
Yeah, Eliot argued that the single most essential part of a refined education is the accurate use of the mother tongue.
Because it is the ultimate outbound art. He compares the act of speaking to fine arts like painting or classical music.
But with a massive distinction in scale, right?
Exactly, because think about it. A brilliant painter might spend their entire life perfecting a canvas that, maybe a few thousand people will ever actually look at.
If they're lucky.
Right. Or a master vocalist might spend decades training their vocal cords for a stage that only a tiny fraction of society visits. But everyone talks.
Everyone.
Regardless of your station in life, your geography, your profession, you talk. Conversation is the life picture you paint every single day for everyone you encounter.
It's kind of a tragedy of scale, really, when you think about it. You can possess a vast amount of knowledge or have these incredible internal accomplishments, but if you can't express yourself, you are just at a severe disadvantage.
The world can only interact with what you can actually communicate.
Right. It makes me think of someone who owns this priceless, massive diamond, but they just leave it completely uncut and lock it in a dark room.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Like, the brilliance is absolutely there. The intrinsic value hasn't changed at all. But until it's cut and polished, no one can appreciate it.
Because the grinding process of cutting a diamond doesn't add any new material to the stone.
Exactly. It just alters the surface so light can finally enter and, reveal the wealth inside.
And that grinding wheel is the effort you put into your daily language. Marden makes the point that locked-up ability might give you some private satisfaction, sure, but it has to be exhibited before the world can actually value it.
But the obstacle isn't just a lack of vocabulary, is it?
No, it's the creeping normalization of linguistic laziness. He actually spends a significant amount of time critiquing the slipshod, helter-skelter English of his era.
Yes! The slang complaints are so funny to read now.
He points to the popular slang of 1911 phrases like, search me, or you just bet, or talking through your hat.
Which is hilarious because those phrases are completely innocuous to us now. They sound like something a grandparent would say.
It would be quaint.
Yeah. But his underlying frustration isn't really about the specific words, right? It's about cognitive offloading.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, when we rely on catchphrases and sloppy prepackaged slang, we stop doing the actual work of original thought.
Exactly. Language and thought are inextricably linked. If you use lazy language, you are cultivating a lazy mind.
Oh, yeah.
When words flow from the lips with no thought of arrangement, no effort to find the precise term that captures a feeling, the brain's neural pathways for complex expression literally begin to atrophy.
So you're losing the muscle.
Right. He insists that the sheer effort of trying to express yourself elegantly, even if you stammer and fail at first, is this tremendous power developer. The friction of searching for the right word is exactly what builds cognitive capacity.
But that friction requires time. It requires patience.
And we don't have much either.
Exactly. And if practicing this art literally develops our brain power, there has to be a reason we so frequently opt for the prepackaged lazy communication instead.
Which brings us back to the disease of hurry.
Right. We are walking around feeling unheard, isolated, and totally disconnected, despite having more tools to communicate than ever before.
And Marden diagnoses this beautifully when he points to the technological revolution of his own time.
Which was what, cheap printing presses?
Yeah, he attributes the decline of deep conversation to a complete revolution in how civilization distributes knowledge. Before his era, knowledge was disseminated almost wholly through the spoken word.
Because you didn't have a choice.
Right. If you wanted to learn about the world or understand a new philosophy, you had to physically travel to a wise person, sit down in a room with them, and just listen.
It inherently required time, deliberation, and actual physical presence. The medium forced people into close proximity.
Then the 1911 version of the tech boom happens. The rise of cheap mass printing. Suddenly, massive daily newspapers and magazines are just everywhere.
For pennies, you could instantly access news that used to cost thousands of dollars to collect from across the globe.
And the structural shift was profound. People began sitting behind their morning broadsheets, just buried in magazines on the train.
So the immediate survival level need to communicate thought by the spoken word was suddenly severed by cheap text.
Exactly. Combine that influx of cheap information with the frantic pursuit of wealth, what he calls the lightning express age in society, completely lost the time to reflect.
We end up with the disease of hurry.
A touch-and-go culture.
Yeah, a culture where we just throw out a quick nod or a muttered greeting and keep sprinting to the next objective. And the physical manifestations he describes are so vivid.
You see them everywhere today, just slightly updated.
Exactly. Instead of snapping a pocket watch, we are, aggressively tapping our smartwatches.
We're checking our phones.
We play a tattoo with our fingers on the table, hitching around in our chairs, visibly bored, just waiting for a tiny gap in the noise so we can interrupt and speak our piece.
And this environment doesn't just ruin our ability to articulate our own thoughts, it completely destroys our capacity to receive anyone else's.
We stop viewing the people around us as individuals to explore.
And start viewing them as utility functions. We only value an interaction if it brings us a client, a business deal, or a specific piece of data we need right now.
We get locked in a subjective mood.
Entirely consumed by our own affairs. True conversational magic requires something that the disease of hurry actively.
Sympathy.
Yes, sympathy. You have to be able to pause your own internal monologue long enough to actually enter into another's life.
But hang on, because there's a section in the source material that seems to totally contradict this idea of deep, profound connection.
Oh, the debutanted advice.
Yes. There's this anecdote sharing advice from a prominent society leader who was launching young debutantes into high society. And her strict advice to these young women was essentially to just chatter.
Just talk about nothing.
Right. She told them to chatter away lightly and gaily, claiming it doesn't really matter much what they say, because nothing bores a man more than a girl who has to be entertained.
It's a very of-its-time phrasing.
It really is. But it sounds like the exact opposite of the refined, diamond-polishing intellectual exchange we were just talking about. It sounds like a mandate for pure, superficial noise.
It does seem like a glaring contradiction at first, I'll give you that. But it actually reveals a very practical understanding of social dynamics.
How so?
That society leaders' advice is specifically targeted at the paralysis of shyness. If two people meet and both are completely silent,
Right.
expecting the other to carry the entire heavy load of initiating the interaction.
The social friction becomes unbearable.
Exactly. You become a burden to the other person.
Yeah.
Pure chatter in that initial moment isn't meant to be profound. It's just a superficial icebreaker.
So it just gets the gears turning.
Right. But the text quickly pivots to show that while chatter might start the engine, it definitely cannot sustain the journey.
Okay, so the chatter is literally just a tactic to lower the initial defenses.
Precisely. And to illustrate what actually sustains the journey, the author brings up a story by Walter Besant about a clever woman who actually spoke very little.
But she was considered a great conversationalist, right?
Yes, she possessed a massive reputation across her social circles as one of the greatest conversationalists of her time.
If she didn't talk much, how did she manage that?
The reason wasn't her own vocabulary or her ability to hold court. It was her empathetic manner. She had this unique ability to make timid, anxious people feel completely safe in her presence.
Oh, wow.
She dissipated their fears and created an environment where the shy felt confident enough to share their best thoughts. She was considered a great converser because she drew the brilliance out of others.
That completely flips the script on what it means to be good at talking.
It really does.
It's not about taking the stage and delivering a monologue. It's about creating a psychological safe zone where the other person feels brilliant.
The author actually uses Abraham Lincoln as another prime example of this tactic.
Oh, really? Lincoln?
Yeah, Lincoln was famous for making himself interesting to everyone he met, but he didn't do it by lecturing them with his political philosophies.
He used stories, right?
Exactly. He used his folksy stories, his tact, and his humor to instantly disarm strangers. He would put them so entirely at ease that they would open up their mental treasures to him without any reserve.
So by being broadly tolerant and genuinely open, Lincoln always walked away from a conversation having received more than he gave.
But to pull that off, to
Mhm.
constantly project that kind of expansive empathy and draw out the best in others, requires immense internal emotional reserves.
Which most of us don't have right now.
Right. You cannot project warmth and genuine curiosity if your own mind is entirely depleted. You can't draw water from a dry well.
And this is the pivot point in the text, isn't it? Where the diagnosis shifts from how we interact with others to how we maintain our own internal architecture.
Exactly.
Because if you are constantly acting as a safe harbor for others while simultaneously navigating the disease of hurry and the barrage of cheap information, you're going to burn out.
And that brings us to the concept of the mental diet.
Right. The author argues that human beings are omnivorous not just biologically, but mentally.
Our harmonious development requires a massive variety of inputs. And he uses a pretty stark medical metaphor from his era to explain this.
The Ricketts comparison.
Yes. He points out that if a growing child is deprived of phosphate of lime in their physical diet, their body simply cannot build strong bones. The framework becomes weak, and the child develops rickets.
And he applies that directly to the mind.
He takes that biological reality and applies it to human character. If you deprive your mind of certain aesthetic nutrients, specifically, if you starve your appreciation for beauty and only consume utilitarian, material-focused thoughts, your character develops mental rickets.
Mental rickets.
You grow up lopsided, unbalanced, and structurally weak.
That is such a visceral way to describe the modern condition. We so often think of the mind like a smartphone battery, you know?
Just needing to be plugged in.
Exactly. When we run harsh, high-processing apps all day, stressing over emails, doom-scrolling the news, grinding out a living, we assume the battery just drains and needs a quick recharge,
Right.
sleep, or whatever.
But Martin's saying it's different.
Right. A better way to understand this utilitarian mindset is to think of it like a muscle locked in a perpetual flex.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
If you keep your bicep tightly flexed for 10 hours straight, it doesn't just run out of energy, it cramps, it stiffens. It entirely loses its range of motion.
You can't just feed it more calories to fix it.
Exactly. You need a deep tissue release to restore the blood flow.
And the deep tissue release for a cramped utilitarian mind is beauty. The author argues that stepping out of the basement of our animalistic, greedy nature and ascending to the upper stories of the mind is not an optional luxury reserved for the wealthy.
It's mandatory.
The love of beauty is a fundamental biological requirement. If we only exercise the money-making gland and let our aesthetic faculties wither, we pay the penalty of returning to a state of pure animality.
He illustrates the sheer power of this release with this incredible story about a school teacher in Chicago.
Oh, the beauty corner. I love
Right.
this story.
It's amazing. She was assigned a classroom with a particularly difficult, unruly group of kids, and instead of implementing harsher discipline or, stricter rules, she decided to alter the physical environment.
She built a beauty corner right there in the classroom.
And it wasn't even extravagant, just a stained glass window, a small oriental rug, a comfortable divan, and a high-quality picture of the Sistine Madonna.
Just a tiny, intentional pocket of aesthetic richness dropped into what was otherwise a very drab utilitarian space.
But the impact on the students was profound and entirely passive.
Insensibly, without any lectures from the teacher, the children's conduct and demeanor just began to alter.
They became gentler with one another, more thoughtful in their actions.
Beauty enforced a new standard of behavior simply by existing in the room. But the true climax of the anecdote centers on one young Italian boy who had been deemed completely incorrigible before the beauty corner was established.
He was an absolute terror to the classroom, and then he suddenly transformed.
Overnight.
Right. And when the teacher, who was completely astonished by his sudden good behavior, asked him what had changed, the boy just pointed to the picture of the Sistine Madonna on the wall.
And what did he say?
He said, "How can a feller do bad things when she's looking at him?"
It is a remarkable testament to how character is fed largely through the eye and the ear. That painting didn't yell at him. It didn't threaten him with detention. It simply elevated the baseline of his reality.
Nice, powerful stuff.
And if a tiny corner of beauty in a dusty Chicago classroom can completely reform an incorrigible child by shifting his baseline, we have to consider what happens when we expose our exhausted, overworked adult minds to the grandest scales of beauty available to us.
Which brings up the actual mechanics of how this works, because Marden isn't just suggesting that looking at a nice painting gives you a fleeting, warm feeling.
No, it's far deeper than that.
He is arguing that beauty acts as a vital, recuperative force that physically alters our biological reality, like it's a physiological medicine.
He tells a story from his own travels out west.
Right. Yeah, moving through the Yosemite Valley. He had just survived a grueling 100-mile stagecoach ride over incredibly rough, unpaved mountain roads.
And the physical toll on a human body in a 1911 stagecoach is hard to even fathom today.
The relentless bouncing, the dust, the pure muscular endurance required just to stay upright. He writes that he was so completely exhausted, he felt he could not even keep his seat for the final 10 miles.
He was at his absolute breaking point.
But then the stagecoach reaches the top of a mountain pass. The sun breaks through the heavy cloud cover, and he catches his first glimpse of the celebrated Yosemite Falls.
And the moment that picture of rare, overwhelming beauty is revealed, he says every single particle of brain fag and muscle weariness vanishes in an instant.
His whole soul thrills with a sense of sublimity to the point where he actually has tears of joy in his eyes.
The sheer awe of the landscape didn't just distract him from his pain. It seemed to literally rewire his exhausted nervous system on the spot.
Because awe is a structural pattern interrupt for the human brain.
Exactly. When he saw that massive waterfall, the sheer scale of the beauty forced his ego to shrink. It immediately shifted his nervous system out of that sympathetic fight-or-flight survival state.
The one the grueling stagecoach ride demanded.
Right, and dropped him directly into a parasympathetic rest-and-digest state. The sublimity of the environment overrides the utilitarian panic of the body.
And because beauty is this powerful of a medicine, Marden believes we have a profound responsibility not just to seek it out for ourselves, but to actively prescribe it to others.
He tells his beautiful little story about an elderly woman he heard of on a Western train.
Oh, the seeds.
Yes. As the train rolled across the barren landscape, she would lean out the open window and pour thick flower seeds from a bottle, just scattering them along the tracks.
And when one bottle emptied, she'd just reach into her handbag, pull out another, and keep pouring.
Her entire philosophy was captured in a single phrase: scatter your flowers as you go, for you may never travel the same road again.
She was using her brief transit through the world to permanently alter the physical landscape of the railroads.
She was leaving the world objectively more beautiful than she found it, providing that exact same physiological medicine to generations of travelers who would look out those same train windows years later.
It is such a pure act of self-investment that accidentally invests in the nervous systems of total strangers.
And this collision of the internal mind and the external environment leads to Marden's ultimate point about the physical consequences of our mental diets.
Right. He relies on a quote from Shakespeare. God has given you one face and you make yourselves another.
The argument here is that every thought you harbor, every resentment you hold on to, and every beautiful thing you appreciate eventually chisels itself into the delicate tracings of your physical face.
The mind has the power to manufacture beauty or ugliness at will, and the body is just the canvas.
If you constantly harbor bad tempers, jealousy, or the chronic anxiety of the disease of hurry, your muscles lock into those expressions.
And over time, those expressions become permanent physical features.
Conversely, inner beauty, sweet dispositions, and harmonious thoughts literally chisel away the harsh lines of the face. He suggests that cultivating an ideal of beauty in your mind will outpicture itself in your physical form and your manner far more effectively than any cosmetic or drug.
You inevitably become the environment you cultivate in your head.
I really do.
To be a genuinely well-informed, successful person, it is clear you cannot just be a dollar chaser running the utilitarian apps in your brain until the system crashes.
That's not sustainable.
Your greatest investments in this life aren't hidden in a portfolio. They are the deliberate words you choose to pull your uncut diamond out of the dark, the deep sympathy you use to hold space for others to be brilliant, and the awe-inducing beauty you intentionally place in your line of sight to keep your own mind from cramping.
So consider the implications of that 1911 warning for our reality today.
Yeah.
If our persistent thoughts and the aesthetic quality of our environments literally shape the physical features of our faces over time, take a hard look at the digital feeds you scroll through.
That's a scary thought.
It is. Examine the environments you tolerate and the quality of the conversations you engage with every single day. Because if those daily inputs are the chisel, what kind of face are you carving for yourself right now?